Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and today we're going to be talking about the pure Elder map strategy, and we're going to be going towards that goal of sustaining T16s. So this is going to be my first test that I've ever recorded with pure T16 Elder maps, and trying to sustain them and seeing what kind of profitability we can see from them. So I decided to pick a fairly unconventional map with a reasonable mob count, which was Arid Lake. And I wanted to do this just because, I wanted a change for one, but I also wanted to pick a map which was easy for my build to move around on, playing Tornado Shot, and also to kill the Syndicate on, because one of the biggest factors with farming Syndicate and high tier maps is being able to move around and dodge the abilities. In maps like T16 and Underground Sea, in such a confined place, a lot of the time you can't dodge most of the mechanics, so in open maps, you can do that. And as a result, I was actually able to complete all of the Syndicate events pretty easily in T16 maps. And doing so, I discovered something pretty damn important, and that is that Syndicate members drop a truckload of maps, like a lot of maps, specifically T16 maps. But we'll get into that in a second when we get to the results. So I just wanted to talk to you guys a bit about how I roll my maps, because I know a lot of you are probably super curious, and that is often one of the main questions that I get. So simply all I did was I chiseled my maps up to 20% quality, I alked them, and I would check to see if they were below 60%, below 70%. Anything that was below 70%, I would use a Chaos Orb and re-roll. And the way, like, if you want to roll a ton of maps and you want to check that quickly, because it can be kind of tedious to go over all of them, a quick tip for you guys is that you can type into your search window on your stash two kind of quotation marks, and then type in quantity, colon, and then +6 or 1 or whatever you want to do. So if I wanted to search for 100s, I could do :1, and it would show me all the 100s here. And then we can see we got 90 down here, so if I wanted to search that, 90, there you go. So what you want to do is grab all the ones with a 6 on it, and re-roll them until they're not 6 anymore. And then after that, all I would do is I would vol the map, and then you have a pretty good chance of getting a 100 plus quantity map. And that's pretty cool, and you'll get a lot more maps from those ones. In addition to that, I decided not to run Influence, due to the fact that Arid Lake is in an absolutely atrocious position for it. So it was influence-less, no prophecies, no Zana, no nothing. And I ran all my maps just like that. If you're curious of what the maps look like in terms of running them and the speed of running them, we'll run one now. This is obviously without sextants, but the mob count I tested is around 550 on average over 25 maps. So that's completely white with nothing on them, no bestiary, nothing like that. So you can see here it's pretty easy to dodge stuff. And oh, look at that, we got a map from one of the exiles. So yeah, because the map is so open, the fortification forts are the bigger ones, and they're not the smaller ones. The smaller ones can be quite difficult and rippy, I've found. The bigger ones are much easier to dodge stuff on. Yeah, you just run around the edge of the map in Arid Lake, and it's pretty easy to find all the mobs and kill them all in a very quick fashion. Compared to something like Underground Sea, you're going to be running this much faster. And my second motive for running Arid Lake was to do delving quickly, and finding the nodes on Arid Lake is extremely easy, and the boss is easy as well. So with all these things combined, Arid Lake was actually a pretty damn good map, and I'm happy I picked it. One drawback though I will say is that the mob count isn't something like Underground Sea. Underground Sea is sitting at around 700 average mobs, whereas obviously we've got 550 here, and that is a big deal. It's a very big deal, because more monsters equals more maps. So that's the map done there. What's that, probably like a minute or two, so not bad at all. With all that covered, let's get into the results, and I think they're pretty interesting. So if you haven't checked out my last test I did on Elder Crater, we're going to be drawing a few comparisons to that test. And the first thing I want to point out between the two is that the investment is a little bit higher on Elder maps, specifically with what I was doing, because I was voling my maps. Right now, vol orbs are worth 1.1 chaos, and yeah, it's just going to jack up the price by 110 chaos. Nothing too much to it there. In addition, it's actually interesting, I used a similar amount of white sextants, just differing by around 6. So to run 100 4-mod white sextant kind of maps, it's going to be around 200 or 2 per map, which is pretty interesting data to have. So that was the cost. We totaled out around 2,138, which is pretty similar to what we were doing over here, but instead of prophecies we have Vaal Orbs and the breach zones that I used part of syndicate farming. So as I said, next up we didn't have any influence, we didn't use any sack frags, no scarabs, we just used the Zana 8% quantity and no prophecies. So that's a big chunk of monsters, quantity and stuff we weren't making use of, so keep that in mind when we're looking at the results here. Obviously next up we have the 155 Atlas bonus and Tornado Shot. And in terms of stuff in the maps, we didn't do Zana, we did do Incursion, Nico and Bestiary though, when they came into the maps, which was actually surprisingly infrequently. I think I got like 1 Nico in all 100 maps, which is pretty crazy. So let's get to the maps now. So I got 77 T16 maps from 100 like well-rolled Elder maps, which were like, some of them were above 100% quantity, all of them were rolled above 70%. I used the un-ID ones when I got the un-ID sextant, and it was just everything was going the way it should be, and I did not sustain. So you definitely have to do more, it seems, or run a higher mob count map. So let's say, what was it, 550 mobs versus 700? That's probably going to make up a decent amount of maps. So, but then again, a lot of my maps came from stuff like Abyss, the boss, and the Exiles, obviously, from the thing. So I definitely could see probably 7 or 8 more maps for doing Underground Sea, maybe a few more, which would get you closer to that kind of sustaining point. But yeah, I don't think Arid Lake was necessarily bad. I think you just will need to invest more if you do want to sustain. Like, we're talking Prophecies with Tempest and Plague of whatever you want, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to test that in the future. Kind of coming down here, we didn't record the price of these T10s and 9s, but we can see that the bulk of the money is made up by these here, these maps that you will want to be selling, 15s, 14s, and 13s, and obviously that will take some amount of time to sell them. Having said that though, you can sell them if you price them competitively pretty quickly. But yeah, we totaled out at 1,914, which pretty much covers our cost, which is a recurring theme between these tests. Just the maps alone, if you sell them, you will actually be able to like kind of get all the money back. Something that's worth noting though, in my test I did get 2 Exalted Orbs, which is above the average. If we change that down to 1, we'll notice that the results do differ by quite a lot. But those Exalted Orb drops definitely do impact results. Nothing else is too kind of noteworthy here. We did get, I think, a few more Master Sextants. Yeah, we got a lot more Master Sextants in this test, as opposed to the Elder one, the Elder Zana Crater, which is a bit strange. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but I guess we'll just see that in future tests if that's consistent or what's going on there. So next up, in terms of splinters, so this is a big thing about running open layout maps versus closed layout maps. So I found it pretty interesting that I got significantly more splinters overall between the 2 tests. So in this test I got a lot of Esh, again like I did on Beach, but I got a lot of Zolf splinters, which was fairly interesting, and quite a significant amount of Chola splinters. So as you can see here in the test, overall I did get more splinters from an open layout map, and that is just because the breach was allowed to expand and have a lot more open area where mobs could spawn, which will lead you to make more money from breaches, and especially it's important if you're running the breaches on a mod and investing that 8 chaos each time. You want an open layout map for that. Next up, because I evolved my maps, I did get fragments, and obviously they will contribute a little bit. It looks like around 50 or 60 C here to my kind of my haul, my currency haul, whatever. Actually, I wonder, is that almost completely recoups the cost of the Vaal Orbs here? I wonder what the actual amount that we got from that is. Looks like we made 48 chaos, so yeah, recouped about half, a little bit under half of the cost of the Vaal Orbs just from fragments, which sell very, very quickly indeed. Next up we have Abyss here. I did notice one interesting thing was a massive difference between the amount of eyes that I got in this test as opposed to the last one. I think I just got less breaches, less sextants for abysses, and I got a lot less jewels from the abyssal depths and the little mounds that I was clicking on. I didn't really get too many from them. Yeah, that's a bit different there and a little bit interesting. So in terms of the big money difference between running the test I had before and this test is that I could do the syndicate. And I feel like a lot of builds on open layouts versus closed will be able to do them a lot easier on open maps. So I was able to do them, and you can see here that I did net quite a lot of currency from them, from the scarabs as well as the pure breachstones, which is pretty good. And I got 2 Malkoons and a Mjolnir, but as we can see here, the uniques don't make up much of the currency we are earning. Most of the currency is from consistent drops, and we can actually see here that most of it is not affected by Magic Find. The maps aren't affected, the splinters and the fragments aren't affected, and almost all of this, actually all of it, pretty much, apart from the uniques, is not affected by Magic Find. So I guess that's kind of where the argument comes in, that Magic Find isn't really worth it as much anymore, unless you're doing it in a group, farming specific divination cards, and you have a real goal in mind. So that's kind of interesting. In terms of overall stats, what did we get? So we made 4,032 chaos in total over 100 maps, and then we had our expenses there at 2,138 chaos. So we were making 40 chaos on map on average, and then our expenses were 21 chaos per map on average. It gives us a profit of around 19 chaos, which is overall, after 100 maps, 12 exalts roughly per 100 maps that we ran, which is pretty interesting. That's about an exalt per 10 maps. If we take our average of exalted down to 1, which is far more normal for 100 maps, we will see that our average exalts go down quite significantly. So it's about 11 exalts per 100 maps, which is about a 1 in 10 maps that you're making an exalt, which is pretty good average. Seeing as a map probably runs 1 minute to 2 minutes, you're probably in hideout for like, what, 30 seconds if you're chaining them quick. So, I don't know, 2 minutes 30, what's that? Probably an exalt. Yeah, exalt every 20 or 30 minutes. Which isn't bad, 2x an hour. It's probably not quite as good as we were getting on beach, was it? Yeah, it's probably similar actually. Yeah, so you can run T16s versus the beaches. Beaches are probably a bit easier, but if you want XP, there is definitely some value associated with that. And you'll also, in this test, I didn't actually complete any of my incursion temples, and I also didn't do any delves, so that is going to be another added benefit to running T16s. But again, we didn't hit that elusive 100 map sustain, so I will be continuing to test stuff until we can hit that profitably, because the dream, obviously, of everyone is to just be able to run maps infinitely while making currency, and also having things that are realistic to sell. I think that it's a little bit unfair to have to constantly try and sell T12s and 11s, so I'm going to try and factor those out of future equations. It would be cool to just be profitable selling maybe T16s, 15s, and 14s and ignoring the rest, because they can be quite tedious to sell. Probably next up we'll be talking a lot more about how to really get to that 100 map point. I swapped my map from Arid Lake to Elder Toxic Sewer for this purpose. I think it's a better map for doing that kind of a test. There's more monsters in it, and it's got a few different challenges to it as well. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed or learned something. Overall, I think, would I recommend this strategy? I absolutely would. It has a lot more flexibility than the traditional shaped strategy, because you get to do every map on the Atlas. I think with influence on there, you'll probably be able to get closer to that 100 number. Was Arid Lake the choice that I would recommend? Probably not, because it's in such an awkward position for influence. Toxic Sewer, for example, is in a much better position. What you want from influence is a one-to-one connection with another map, and to just ping-pong it backwards and forwards that way. In addition to that, I really enjoy delving. It's one of my favorite things to do right now, so I needed T16 maps to do that. So I think that it definitely has a lot of advantages over the beach farming and the there's Eldazana, and I think I would recommend T16 farming to anyone who has the gear to do it and doesn't mind selling maps. So that's going to be the video, guys. Expect more experiments coming up, but also some other tips kind of videos. I'm going to do a lot of stuff with prophecies coming up, and you guys can look forward to that. And of course, if you guys see me online when I'm on Twitch streaming, definitely pop in and say hello. We've been trying out a lot of cool stuff, and you guys can kind of get the information a little bit early. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.